Thanks for tuning in to the Mission Matters podcast, where we feature successful, mission-driven leaders committed to creating a positive change in the world. Our mission with this channel is to inspire other leaders by providing industry insights, new ideas, and inspiring stories from the pros.
All right, welcome. Paul Fife is my name. I'm host of this show where I talk with leaders heading up mission-focused organizations, leading from the heart, inspiring others, and making a difference in our communities. I have with us Marc Kalan. Is it Kalan or Kalan?
Kalan.
Kalan, yes. Marc Kalan. Marc Kalan is an educator in the marketing field, and I've spent the last 15 minutes talking with him before we started recording this podcast. And even though I've been in the marketing field for 18 years, I still think I can learn something from this guy. He's got such amazing amount of nuggets, and you're going to hear those in probably a few minutes. He's a highly accomplished marketing and sales executive with over 30 years of experience, transitioned into a distinguished educator, renowned for exceptional teaching at the Rutgers Business School in the marketing department, recognized both by peers and students. Lots of awards from students, by the way, as I learned. And that's actually how I was introduced to Marc. We have a summer intern who was in his class and said, "You gotta interview this guy," and just loved him. So, welcome, Marc. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So we have to. I think we could talk about just about anything, and you can pretty much unpack it and tell some stories. But we have a lot in common because I know, in addition to being in the Rutgers Business School, you actually taught at Fairleigh Dickinson, where two of my brothers had gone to school, and of course my daughter is an educator herself. So we have a lot of things in common. And you're in New Jersey, which is where I was born and raised, and that's always interesting. But let's just talk about your journey and what has led you to Rutgers, and what has that journey been like?
Gee, that's a long time. We'll use all of our time up if you ask me to give you that whole journey.
2 minutes.
I will try to condense it quite a bit. So as an undergraduate, I finished all of my course requirements. I was a history major as an undergraduate, went and got some education courses, got a teaching certificate, graduated from my undergraduate experience, taught high school for 1 year and said, "This is crazy and these kids are crazy. So I think it's time to figure out what I really want to do." And I went back to graduate school and received my MBA from Columbia University quite a few years ago at this point. And we'll let you guess how many years ago as we talk on. And I entered the world of business, which has been fascinating. I'm a marketing guy. I have been fascinated by marketing, by communication, by advertising, by packaging, by actually behavioristic things. If you think about my interests in history, which are quite in depth, and I read a lot of historical novels and biographies and those types of things. By the way, I finished Grant not too long ago. What a fabulous book, but a heavy read, long read, but a lot of fun. Anyway, so I like these kinds of things. And I've always been fascinated. My family always teased me that I seem to know every commercial, which isn't really true. But I certainly had an interest in consumer goods and in consumer behaviors going way back, even before I understood them to be more technical. I entered business, got a couple of years of experience, and then was lucky enough to be able to enter my chosen field of consumer packaged goods, CPG business. And I hope some of your listeners are aware of the CPG world. Basically anything sold in a package that's sold in the store or through some other distribution channel would fall into the CPG world. And I became a brand management type, and I worked on a variety of different products in a variety of different categories, from bathroom tissue to chewing gum, to razors, to blades, to new products, to health and beauty aids, to over-the-counter pharmaceuticals, to appetite suppressants, and a variety of others. So I spent about 10 years on the client side of the business at several different organizations. Interestingly, while none of those organizations exist today, as Paul and I discussed for just a couple of minutes, all of the brands I worked on exist today. Brands have lives. Brands are breathing entities in a sense. They deliver something that of consumer expectation and desire. And I've always found that very fascinating. And how do you understand what consumers need and then craft those solutions? And over the years, I started on the client side, as I said. I then went into new ventures for nearly 20 years, about 18 years. I was in 4 or 5 different ventures on the agency or vendor or supplier side, assisting major consumer packaged goods companies like Procter and Gamble and Unilever and Kraft and J&J, among almost every other consumer packaged goods company of note in America. And I traveled around and visited them, fascinating, assisting consumer packaged goods marketing teams with marketing their products. And I liked doing it. It was fun. At one point, I said to my wife, I think I'd like to start teaching again. I taught a little bit way back when. I run seminars now. My companies have been bought. I've had to retrain sales forces. For example, Velasas Communications bought in-store advertising, and we had them. I worked for Velasas for a year and a half at the latter part of the 8.5 years of my being VP of marketing of that startup. Then I was VP of sales of a couple of other startups. So I've had this ability and this excitement of interacting with professionals, but always focused on end users, consumers. And I continue that today. So around 2000, give or take a year, I had said to my wife, I think I'd like to start sharing and teaching some of this stuff. And she was positive and encouraged me, which is always a lovely thing. And you mentioned Fairleigh Dickinson. They were the first ones to give me a shot. I'm here in New Jersey. I reached out to a couple of local schools, and the first one took about a year to have them say, hey, we have a course you could teach, direct, database, and interactive marketing. You have some experience. Now, I had been in a digital startup. I had been in 1997 in a company called Planet U for 3 years as a digital startup. So I was somewhat uniquely positioned with some experience in digital marketing. And later, few years post this, I will teach the first digital marketing course ever offered at Rutgers Business School. Of course, let me share to all of our listeners that I felt there were others who could do an even better job. One of my guest lecturers was fabulous, and we hired her full-time, and she's now a fabulous professor and has built the whole digital marketing program at RBS. So we're continually moving forward. But that's how I got started in that field, and I've taught almost every topic that we've offered at Rutgers Business School. By the way, so I was at Fairleigh Dickinson. I then added teaching at Kean University, at William Patterson, and Rutgers. And it was shortly thereafter that the chair of my department at Rutgers said, I'd like to hire you full-time. And I said, I'd like to be hired full-time. And that was about 17 years ago. So I'm a very lucky guy. I've had it, and I won't even go through all the experiences I've enjoyed at RBS, but just share with your listeners, we have a great business school. It's exciting to be somewhere where the focus is positive, up, where everybody's excited, and where the students are excited to be students and recognize the value they're getting in their educations. And it's a pleasure being part of that process. And so I consider myself a pretty lucky guy as I look towards the latter part of my personal career.
Lucky indeed. I believe that the Rutgers Business School is one of the best business schools in the nation. I know I interviewed Luke Greeley a week ago and talked to him about the diversity in the school and the accomplishments and the key performance indicators that you measure against. It's really one of the best schools and departments in the nation, and that's just a fact, right? Based on certain key performance indicators. So I'm
let me say then, yeah, thank you, Paul. It is a fact. Luke's a good guy, by the way. I've known Luke for a number of years, and he's now, I believe, he's one of the deans, I think, in the Newark school. I think he's
assistant dean of the Newark.
Yeah, he's of the Newark camp. Yeah. So he's grown. He was a graduate student, I think, when I first met Luke a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but you're totally right. RBS, that's what we call our RBS, Rutgers Business School, has achieved. Our supply chain department is one of the top 3 in the country. Was founded by Professor Lay, who's now our dean, and she's wonderful. Our finance department is top notch. Our accounting department, I teach in the Masters of Accounting program as well. Yes, I teach marketing. I don't teach accounting, don't worry, but I do teach in what's called PAMBA, Professional Accounting MBA. And I've been lucky to teach, by the way. One of the exciting things about being at a place like Rutgers is that we have these fabulous specialty programs. We have an incredible executive MBA program domestically. I've had the pleasure of teaching 4 times, twice in Beijing, twice in Singapore, in our international executive MBA program, which was what a great experience. I've taught the last 3 years or so in a course I created in the Masters of Fashion program, and that's been very exciting. I teach in the Professional Accounting MBA program. I will do that again in the spring for about the 7th year. So being at a place like a Rutgers gives one like myself the opportunity to be challenged and grow and learn in process while sharing. And that's been very exciting. I've written case studies and had them published. I've written some articles and had them published. Part of that is my desire to share. As a non-tenure track full-time faculty member, I am not required to research or write. Tenure track folks, that's part of the tradition, publish or perish is what they used to say. But myself and a number of others, we're called non-tenure track. We're in a parallel track, and Rutgers is one of the few schools that offers this sort of parallel track that allows us to be recognized for the values that we bring in educating and growing our students, and not just that we did a study or published something, but rather that we created strong people for the marketplace. And I think, as you said, Rutgers being a top school is reflected in the quality of our students, in the salaries and careers that they're able to generate. And frankly, having them come back to me and say, you were a positive impact. I learned things from you, or I was stimulated by you, or you challenged me to think and process information, and learning how to do those types of things make me stronger in what I do now. And I have great students who work at companies like J&J and Mars and, oh my goodness, almost every company you can name, even in the retail field. I remember 2 of my students went to work for Kohl's department stores, for example, in different areas. And so it's really exciting for us in our school, and myself personally, to be seen as a positive factor in helping so many people grow. The other thing I would add here, and I think you mentioned it when you mentioned Luke before, is that Rutgers is, especially our newer campus, we have 2, for those who don't know, we have 2 fabulous campuses that our business school faculty is responsible for. We are technically the Rutgers Business School of Newark and New Brunswick. Those were at one point many years ago separate schools. Today, we are combined under the same administration for the business school, and the faculty covers both campuses, and I teach on both campuses fairly evenly, a little more on one than the other on certain semesters, but both. What's so exciting about Rutgers is we are a reflection of the future. We are a reflection of the new global economy. We are one of the most diverse schools in the country. We used to be number 1 for many years, like 30 years, on U.S. News and Report, when they would measure the diversity and demographics of the student bodies. We would be right at the top. I think we had like 128 countries represented one year. I mean, nutty, huge numbers.
Yeah.
For me, that's very exciting. People from all over the world getting together in a classroom, people of different cultures, of different ethnic backgrounds, of different religious backgrounds, of different economic backgrounds. Many of our students are first-generation college students, or if it's a graduate school, again, first generation. We're forming and framing the future world. And if I can be a small part in helping others to do a great job in that, I think I'm creating a nice legacy that makes me feel pretty good. And by the way, yes, they pay me. That's not so bad either. But at this stage of my career, it's more the enjoyment of being in the classroom, of stimulating those to think, of helping people learn how to effectively present who they are, what they are, why they are, how they've come to certain ideas, or how they've come to end circumstances. You and I started speaking a little bit ago, and I think I started to allude to, it's not how smart you are. We're very lucky. Look at this wonderful country we all live in. The people are very bright. We have amazing resources. We have the best economy in the world, bar none, not even close. Well, Sweden's doing pretty well. They got some pretty good stuff going on up there. I was reading about Sweden yesterday, and for Europe, they've got more billion-dollar startups and unicorns and things of that nature. But importantly, here we are in this incredible environment. And it's our job as educators to help our students stay at the top, to challenge them to go beyond what's expected, to be beyond what the basics are. I tell my students there's a lot of smart people. Here in New Jersey, we have some wonderful schools. Here in the Northeast or eastern part of the United States, we have a lot of excellent business schools, a lot of excellent students, and we compete effectively with virtually all of them. And I mean from the top. I'll give nods: Harvard, Wharton, Columbia. We have a lot of great schools. Our students effectively compete with all of them. Why? Not only are they smart and hardworking, but they've learned how to effectively communicate who they are, what they are, why they believe things are so important. And so it's beyond being smart. A lot of smart people there. If you're just going to be hired for smartness, it's a lot of people. But what you want is somebody who's going to raise the level of your organization, who are going to bring thoughts and ideas. And as the environment continues to change, and which it most definitely does, it's changing all the time. Look at what you and I discussed just a few minutes ago. I was in graduate school. While it seems to me like yesterday, it's going to seem to you listeners like the Stone Age, like I was back beating on tablets or something. I didn't have a laptop because they didn't exist.
Yep.
Desktop computers barely existed, even those. All of these cell phones, hey folks, they didn't exist. Smartphones. I remember when I went from a flip phone to a smartphone, and my students cheered me one day in class because I was probably the last one to get an iPhone instead of an old Razor or a flip phone, and the students cheered. But they come to my classes because they know it's not about the application of technologies, which continue to move forward, but it's the dissection of challenges, of understanding human behaviors. And to me, that's the exciting part. As a history guy, I took anthropology and psychology and sociology, a lot of these types of things that really are a breakdown of human behaviors, a breakdown of how we look at things, how we make decisions. How do we decide what to buy? How does a retailer decide what to carry? How does a manufacturer decide what to invest in? I've been in new products. I've worked in that for several years in a major corporation. The Warner Lambert Corporation, a big four, it doesn't exist anymore, folks, but it was a Fortune 500 organization that until the year 2000, when it was taken over by Pfizer and broken up, was a leader in the country in a lot of different fields. And I worked in chewing gums, I worked in razors and blades, and we worked in cold products and skincare products and a variety of others as well. Things keep changing. What doesn't change, I think, is the focus on effective communication, the focus on what are the needs of the end user and how do we deliver the best solution. And best solution isn't necessarily the least expensive or necessarily the most expensive. Best looks at all of these various factors together. And that's something else that we teach, and I work very hard in my classes. Excuse me. And your intern as well experienced this because she was in one of these classes. I teach a lot of marketing strategy these days, which I find fascinating. And I build the course around a semester-long simulation that places my students in a small team environment, 3 or 4 people. Yeah. I think in Lynn's case, it was 3, I believe, in each team. She was in a smaller class, relatively speaking, in order for them to learn how to run a business. And I've been using a simulation from a company. I'm not going to give them a push here necessarily. I don't know if that's appropriate, but they've been very good in helping me leverage my students' abilities to have some practical experience. And so we run a simulation. It challenges them to do production forecasts and pricing forecasts and consumer research and distribution channel, all the various things that a marketing manager would need to address. They're given that experience in a highly dynamic and competitive environment because that's what we live in the real world, a highly competitive and dynamic environment that's changing all the time. one of the exercises we talk about is marketing myopia. And I opened my semester as a big topic of companies that missed it, that were leaders for a long time because they felt we have a great product.
A lot
And
of
by the
those.
way, they did. And where are they today? Where's Kodak? Where's Blockbuster? Where are these various companies that were leaders, but they were leaders focused on a product, not focused on a solution? And when a better solution came along, when Netflix came along and streaming media was finally something that worked, and Blockbuster tried to get into streaming media, by the way, with Enron of all companies, and they failed. It didn't work. It's in the Enron movie, which I also use in my course because I think it's a great reflection of a good idea gone really bad, and human beings doing inappropriate behaviors to benefit themselves rather than what was more appropriate to the business. But we could digress and talk about that for hours as well. I do in class, so we'll let my students have that. But here, it's the importance of helping new potential managers recognize that there are processes that will help you get to a solution, but you have to recognize what those needs are.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, if you can recognize the unmet needs of consumers or poorly met, I'm a consumer marketer, remember, even though I've worked in B2B for many, many, many years, B2B for businesses that were B2C focused. I've always been focused and interested in consumers and how people make decisions. I sometimes think I might get in trouble because I walk through stores and watch people who are looking at the shelves, they're looking at products, they're looking at packages, and I do the same thing. I love to walk through stores. I love to see packaged goods stores primarily, by the way. I'm not a soft goods guy. You know, I often laugh. Women walk through department stores touching every fabric. Guys walk through looking at the shelves and trying to figure out what's the best. But we have a lot of fun. And so I'm very lucky. And I've also, and I'm sort of running on here, a touch ball I probably recognize, but I'm lucky to have been recognized by both my peers, by our administration through the awarding of various platitudes and awards, if you will, and of course by my students on both campuses having been voted multiple times as one of the top within my profession, within my department, within our school. And to me, they're my audience. Those are my customers. I'm a marketer. My customers are my students, and satisfying their needs by helping them be better at what they're focused on doing actually gives me a lot of pleasure. So it's been a very good run. I've been very lucky, and I hope it continues for a little bit longer anyway. We'll see.
I hope so too. You're certainly a mentor to a lot of people. I haven't seen the Enron movie, but I did see, I think it's the movie about the BlackBerry, I guess.
BlackBerry is one of those companies that I point out to was number one in smartphones. I said to them, how would you have liked to have been the BlackBerry product manager in 2005? You had a 95 market share. You had the best encryption system in the world. You had, people loving what you're doing. And all of a sudden, Steve Jobs walks on stage, takes this little thing out of his pocket, similar to what he did with the Nano a few years prior with the music playing. He said, I have 100 songs in my pocket. Yeah. Now he takes out the first iPhone in 2006, I believe it was, and into 2007. And within just a few years, he has the 90 some odd market share, and BlackBerry is bankrupt.
Disappears.
They're still around. I mean, RIM, Research in Motion, which then changed its name to BlackBerry after, but it was basically a dead company. I mean, it never achieved anything again. It missed satisfying the needs of consumers. And if that isn't the basic premise of what marketing is all about, then I'm missing it. But I think that is the basic premise. And you better look at the competition. Kodak was an amazing company for 100 years. And Kodak's one of the ones I choose. For 100 years, Kodak was a top 10 in the world company. Fabulous, great. They were technologically advanced. They had more patents, which is what they've survived on, even in post-bankruptcy, on selling patents and licensing patents, with 90% of their employees gone. What happened? It's not that people stopped taking pictures. If you had asked Kodak, what business are you in? I believe they would have said to you, I'm in the film business. We make film and affiliated products, the Brownie camera, the developing of et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
They missed it. They were not in the film business. They were in the memories business. And I get my students to get there on their own, by the way. Let's talk about what this is. You need to understand what you're really delivering as a company and what the product satisfies. And if a better solution comes along, in this case, it is our digital world that you and I have spoken about a little bit, and that has become a big part of your business and the folks who work in your organization, right? That's changed how we deliver things, but we deliver more pictures today by far than ever before.
Yep.
We post billions of them a day, basically. And what I say to my students is, how are your grandchildren going to find those pictures in the cloud? I said, you can come into my office here in Rutgers and you'll find a picture of that I knew when I was a kid, that a picture was taken, my brother, my father, and I, in front of a cannon at Fort Ticonderoga. I remembered that when I was a little kid. When my children were of the similar age, we went on a trip and we took a picture near a cannon at Fort Ticonderoga, which is in upstate New York. For those of you who might not know, it's where Lake Champlain and Lake George come, and it was where Ethan Allen conquered the British in 1775. It had been controlling that Northwest waterway. There were no roads in those days. So that was a pretty cool thing. Well, I remembered when I was a kid that we had taken a picture. So I went to my mother's house at the time she was still alive, and I found a tin of old pictures. And sure enough, I found the picture of my father, my brother, and I at a cannon. And I had a picture now of myself with my 3 kids. Wasn't the exact same cannon, but it was pretty close by. I have the 2 of them framed together. My point being, we saved pictures, we saved memories. Today, I think that's becoming a lot more challenging. While we take more pictures and far and away share a lot more.
Yeah.
What will happen down the road? Will our next generations have the enjoyment and pleasure of seeing that stuff or not? And I'm not sure how that'll net out. But my point here being, the field changes, the environment changes, but the concepts don't change. In my humble estimation, the concepts are exactly the same. Identify consumer needs and then create solutions for those needs. And as the facilitating of those needs, the technologies, as we've had dramatic changes in the last 25 years, and it's now a good 30 years since Amazon was founded, right? 1994, 95. Frankly, I thought Jeff Bezos was crazy. I was working in the field. I was in the area. Shortly thereafter, I would be in a startup. And here's a guy who said, we're going to go online and we're going to sell books. Reading was declining. People weren't buying books on this medium that almost nobody was on. Remember, this is before the internet bubble crashed, and your listeners can read about that if they want. Way before. It doesn't crash till 2000, where Wall Street was investing in concepts until they finally realized we got to invest in profits, not concepts. Concepts don't make money for anybody. And a lot of companies lost a lot of money, and a couple of smart people got out with a lot of money who did it very well. And so all that fun stuff. But anyway, I thought he was crazy, but he had a great vision. And the vision was human behaviors are going to change, and we're going to be at the forefront of it. And we're going to create an electronic supermarket, if you will, an electronic mall of everything. And he continually invested, even though he lost money for 20 years. He invested. He convinced the investment community that the future was going to have this huge digital component. And guess what? He's right. And incredibly successful. We're renovating, we're fixing up our house. We're about to sell it, for example. And my wife and I decided last Friday night, I think it was, we're going to change a couple more of the light fixtures. So we'd already changed some of them. My house is 125 years old, so it's time to update a few things for new buyers. So what did my wife do? She went on Amazon, found a couple of lighting fixtures she loved, and on Sunday they were delivered, and on Monday the electrician put them in.
Yeah.
What a change of a world. Come on, this is an amazing world to be able to do that. That So my point is, we're going to continue to have this evolution. That's part of the excitement. And a lot of very smart people have started businesses. They've used this digital environment to learn how to, but it's the same challenge as before. Let's identify poorly met or unmet needs and craft solutions for those needs. And if we do, then we're going to be successful. And certainly a lot of the new technology businesses, I think, fit that model. Now, we're very lucky that we're able to leverage a lot of things that we didn't before. There's technologies that allow you to create things, to deliver things. Look at this delivery system we've set up. I mean, Amazon, out of nowhere, has built a whole universal delivery system with trucks, and was FedEx the generation before that with planes and other cons. So the technologies keep moving forward, but the end game, I don't think, has changed very much. It's just the facilitating of how it gets better and better. And it's pretty exciting to be part of that. And from my personal perspective, to be able to be a resource for the next generation, for them to be able to leverage some of the things that I hope I've learned and I hope I'm able to share or to stimulate them. To me, it's all about, Paul, engagement, getting people to think. If we're able to engage them, and I think that's part of the reason I've been reasonably successful in this educational component of my career. I've been traveling around the country for years, going to clients, going to agencies, conferences, whatever it was, learning, but also sharing, learning, but also teaching and identifying new ideas. I joined my first startup in 1988 after nearly a dozen years of doing other stuff. And look how great it's been. It's, the world has changed. It's been fun to be part of it. Fun to be part of it.
I think the takeaway here is the essence of marketing hasn't changed, will never change. It's the delivery, the application, the channels that continually update. And I love what you said about also if a particular company thinks they sell a product, it's a premise that's already off, right? Because they're not selling a product; they're selling a need, or an answer to a need, a solution.
Thank you. Okay, so that's exactly what we sell.
Yeah.
We sell, people buy benefits.
Yeah.
The definition of benefit is the outcome sought that motivates consumer behavior. I teach that to my students. People buy benefits, the outcome sought that motivates behavior. We have to recognize as marketers what are those needs, and then with our teammates, whether they're research and development, market research, distribution, sales, promotion, advertising, whatever those other complementary or supportive functions are, that's part of the solution. But people buy solutions. We buy food because we're hungry, right? Not because we want to wear it. We want to eat it. We want to enjoy it. We buy something to drink because we're thirsty, and we make the decision whether or not to make those valuable exchanges. And we haven't even gone into that portion of it. What's the value and what's the trade-off? That's a whole nother exciting area. But that's how we as marketers need to think. And so I try to challenge my students to look beyond the product. Don't be product focused. That's a mistake. That's a mistake for a marketer. Now, for our operations people, I want them product focused. I want them to be able to produce those solutions and deliver them into the marketplace in the most cost-effective way, in the largest potential audience solution, if you will. And that's pretty exciting and pretty cool. But the bottom line is we're people and we have needs. And I don't mean necessarily physical needs, although as we teach, we even teach Maslow's hierarchy. We teach how you climb up the pyramid of hierarchies as you satisfy various physical and safety and social and then internal ego and then esteem needs as you climb up. There's always somewhere else to go, but it's human behaviors that are the critical part. And from my perspective, also the fun part. That's why I like being in the classroom. Students are fun. People are fun. It's an interesting place to be. I'm not a technologist. Never have been that strong. I can get around my computer just fine. My wife doesn't think so, but I'm actually relatively competent in most of the things that we have to do. Somehow I do figure out how to grade all my students and how to get them involved. But those are technology assistants. They're not philosophical directions.
Yeah.
And it's understanding human behavior and how people alter and change and make decisions and recognize challenges that I find exciting, because that's what's always changing. That's the dynamics. One other thing I add when I start my introduction to marketing courses, and I will teach 3 sections of them. One of them has 150 students registered currently. Crazy, right? But big classes. One of the things I start off with is our various definitions of marketing. Exchanging value, creating relationships, identifying unmet needs. Those are all really important side ones. But the main one, the AMA definition of the conception and pricing and development and blah, 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 and all these distribution to satisfy needs of organizations and individuals, I actually add a statement. And I tell my students, Professor Kalan is adding this last statement. And the statement is, in a dynamic environment. What does dynamic mean? And of course, somebody steps up and says, that means change. Yes, we're in an environment of constant change. That's what's exciting, but that's what you have to recognize. And the Kodaks, the Blockbusters, they got somewhere that was fabulous, but then they stagnated. They missed the moving forward, the continuation of that change, whether it's impacted by technologies, which today have become huge. Digital technologies, digital communications. Look at all the social media outlets and channels, whether it's Instagram or Pinterest, of course, Facebook, so many others. TikTok is now the one that has become the preeminent, as the Chinese are stealing our minds, I guess, or something, if you believe that. But the truth of the matter is, people like to share. People like to be social. People like to share. And once we understand that as business people, as marketers, and as facilitators, I think once we understand that human need and human desire, then we can set up solutions and programs of those solutions where, when, how we deliver those solutions that satisfy the needs of the individual as well as the need of the organization. Let's not minimize the importance of satisfying the needs of organizations where people work, where people get the income to satisfy their family's housing and food and education and social and entertainment needs. All of that's important. We shouldn't minimize the importance of all of those things. I think they're all pretty critical, and many businesses support them. But that is really what we as marketers need to do. We need to understand, where's the market going so that we can not fall behind. And hopefully those who are really good and make some really good guesses or bets or ideas, like Amazon, it might have taken a long time to come to fruition, like Tesla, whether you like Mr. Musk or don't, or some of these other organizations that have been enormously successful because they have adopted new technologies as well as focusing on needs of the marketplace and creating solutions for those needs.
Indeed. Mark, I feel like we could talk for hours on this topic. There's a lot to unpack here, but yeah, marketing won't change. The needs of people and human desires won't change. Just the technology and the application, the execution needs to be adopted. And
I would hope, Paul, agree with you that the basic needs don't change.
Yeah.
But the application and how we approach them and how we satisfy them change dramatically. And it's the surrounding environments, whether they're legal or political or technological or sociological or demographic. Look at the amazing demographics that are changing in our wonderful country right now. Whatever your personal views might be, and I'm not going to make any implications here, but look at how exciting we have. We have people with different backgrounds, different demographics from different parts of the world who have come to this part of the world because we offer such amazing, amazing opportunities. And that's why the United States is a lucky, lucky place to be. Whether you were born here, I was lucky enough to be born here, or whether your families, your parents or grandparents were the ones who came. For me, it was my great-grandparents, or whether it's you're the one who's coming from another demography or another culture. This is the place everybody wants to come. This is the place that nurtures all of those things. And I believe that marketing is the underpinning that enables so many to create success. We have a lot of engineers come here. Just being an engineer doesn't make you successful, but engineering solutions that people can practically use becomes fabulous. And so hopefully you and I and others like ourselves will design and develop and challenge and stimulate the next generation and the ones beyond to continue to push those barriers forward. And that's a fun place to be. And aren't we lucky to be part of that process?
What a great final thought. Marc, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I think we could, again, talk for hours. Maybe there'll be a part 2 in the future. I don't know. Or maybe we just hop on a call offline and just talk, because I feel like we have a lot to unpack there.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to yourself and whomever else stumbles across the various podcasts. I hope they've enjoyed or taken away a couple of things from what you and I have been able to discuss. And it's fun. Bottom line, everybody, just as when I teach my seminars and workshops on presentation skills, and really we didn't talk a lot about that today, but I'm a big believer in the importance and effectiveness of having good communication skills. So when we talk about those kinds of things in my class, and one of my handouts that I've created that I give to my students at the end of the semesters when I walk them through all sorts of things, voice and tone and body motion, a lot of the things that can help you to be a better communicator, telling stories to extend things. You mentioned stories early on in our discussion, and that's something that I incorporate a lot in my discussions with my students to give things a real life feeling. So here, I want my students and everyone else to enjoy these kinds of things, and always remember the key about being a good presenter is to have fun while you're doing it, to be able to have your audience feel the energy and feel the fun of what it is you're feeling by covering or discussing these topics. And I think from my perspective and my students, and I thank them for rewarding me so many times, this is I've accomplished this reasonably well. And that's probably why your intern said you should have this professor come and speak, because he's fun. If you can make learning fun, if you can incorporate good stories or other anecdotes, etc., then people want to listen. They want to be involved. They want to hear. And I do believe, and it's a different topic for a different day, that many of our students today are bored and have not been challenged and have just been seen as you're a sponge to absorb. And I don't believe that. I don't think you're a sponge to absorb. I believe you're an individual to consider and make good comments and think things through. So thank you for allowing me to provide some of those thoughts that I feel here on this podcast. I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think people who have listened to this podcast will agree. This has been a fun episode, and it's been fun listening to you. You definitely exude the passion and the enjoyment of what you do, and that makes listening to you fun. So I have firsthand knowledge of that.
Well, now you do, and thank you. And by the way, if you're going to lecture for 3 hours a class, for 5 classes, that's about 15 hours a week of lecturing, of which some of the material comes back up again, but most of it is fresh for each one.
Yeah. You
have to have a little passion and energy and excitement to keep those students excited and focused,
engaged,
and just awake.
Yeah.
Engaged and just awake. And I think we've been reasonably successful in doing that. By the way, to anyone else who might be watching this, you want to have an audience focused on you, don't let them play with electronics in an academic situation where you're teaching and wanting them to be focused and engaged. I do not allow my students to have their phones or computers utilized in those fashions during class. I'm very strict about it. I'm known to be strict about it. In the beginning of each semester, students are not very happy. You mean I can't watch Netflix during class or some other ridiculous social media or TikTok?
Sure.
And I say, absolutely not. The whole world is out there. I have this one little room. If you don't want to be here, that's fine. You can leave. You've got the whole world to go watch those. But if you want to be here, be focused, be involved. And while it may be a little challenging the first couple of weeks, by the end of the semester, I get accolades from so many of the students saying, I was a little concerned in the beginning. It's 3 hours, a really long class. Your class isn't like that. And it didn't feel like 3 hours. It felt like a lot less.
Yeah.
My response always is, when you're engaged in thinking, time flies. When you're reading PowerPoints and listening to someone monotonously just read things at you, it's boring.
Yeah.
And so I hope that's a good takeaway from my marketing students and any of the other students I've had the pleasure of interacting with.
And for teachers out there.
Find a way to engage your audience, keep them involved,
Yeah.
Makes it exciting, makes it fun for them. And when they're learning and having fun, they're focused, and that makes it fun for you.
Indeed. Well, we'll end on that note. Till next time, everyone. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Matters podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.